The other challenge that we have is we allow ourselves to be fragmented as black parties. White people don't allow themselves to be fragmented. They can have various parties, but when it comes to critical issues, they are one. They are one when it comes to how to deal with land, how to deal with the economy, and so on. But we are not one when it comes to those things. And ask yourself, who is behind our fragmentation?
Hello, Elite Podcast family, and welcome to yet another installment of Elite Podcast, where we bring you the creme de la creme of leadership. And today is no exception. I'm very pleased to bring someone who I believe will definitely keep you on your toes regarding issues of legal issues and issues of politics as well. Allow me to introduce to you today Mr. Jabu Rakwena. Welcome, sir, to the Elite Podcast.
Thank you so much, and greetings to your viewers.
Thank you so much for coming on board. Just tell us a little bit more about yourself, just briefly, your history, please.
Well, I was born in Middelburg, and some 58 years ago. And that's where I got schooling, and I completed my matric in 1984 at the high school there called Sozama High School. And immediately thereafter, in 1985, I registered with the University of the North, Tafelberg, for my law degree, which I completed in 1989. And then subsequent thereto, I stayed for a year without any prospects of employment because I couldn't get any employment. I remember, I think it was in 1990, I went to a firm in Middelburg. It was a white firm. I still remember the name, Juberta Attorneys. And they had advertised for a candidate attorney. Well, then they used to be called article clerk. And then I went for the interview, was successful in the interview, and we discussed salary. And this man said to me, "I'm going to pay you 50 rands." And I thought he was joking. We need to find that.
There was a lot of money back then. Or?
It was not.
It was not even in that age.
It was not. I mean, I used to do some temporary work with my grandfather used to run a shop, and he was giving me 300 rands. So this man is offering me 50 rands, and he was dead serious. I said to him, "I'd rather walk the streets." And then I managed to get articles in Newcastle with a firm called Mlocho and Partners. That's where I did my articles, and I qualified. I was actually admitted at Pietermaritzburg High Court as an attorney. And then I worked in Emelo. There was a branch office that I used to run in Emelo. And then it was in 1997 that I relocated from Emelo. I developed an interest in property law. Property law is conveyancing, bond registrations, and so on. I developed an interest in property law, and there were some two young fellows here in Witbank, Van Rensburg and Kruger. They had just started their practice, and they invited me to attend lessons. They were offering lessons for conveyancing. And that's where I then got help from them to study. And I qualified as a conveyancer. And subsequent to my qualification as a conveyancer, they invited me to join the firm. And then in March 1997, I became a director of the firm. And I'm married, and I've got kids. I'm staying here in Witbank. I'm a Catholic, by the way. And interestingly, there's a fellow who was saying to me, he saw me at church, and he said, "It's unlikely for attorneys to be to be Christians." I said, "That's very strange." But it's not surprising. You know, I remember an incident in a client that I went with. I think we went to Krugersdorp for a case. And the court broke for lunch. We went to a restaurant to eat, and when the food was served, this client says to me, I hope you are not going to be offended. I say, why? I would like us to pray. And I say, why do you think I'll be offended by a prayer? And he said, well, attorneys are said to be liars, so I believe that. So there is that perception out there that attorneys are liars, and it's not true. I think I need to dispel it.
Well, they think you play the devil's advocate too much, maybe that's what the connotations are. But if you've watched this movie called The Devil's Advocate,
yes.
Yeah, you'll understand where maybe some of these reservations
are coming from. Yes.
And the fact that even though someone is guilty, with some good legal wrangling and perfect legal execution, you can actually get someone, to walk scot-free. So I guess some of the connotations come with that. But since we're actually talking about that, talk us through some of the highs and lows that you've experienced over quite a long legal career.
Yes, it dates back since 1990. Well, 1990 is what was when in fact 1991, that's when I started my articles or my candidate attorney. And it's been a very fulfilling journey. I really enjoyed myself, and I've got no regrets why I became an attorney, and it has been that kind of a journey wherein you experience a lot. I normally tell my clients that I've seen it all. I don't think there's anything that would shock me. So in this career, you come across different types of situations. I mean, you can never say one case is the same. What is critical is that you need to prepare all the time. No case is simple, and no case is too difficult. If you do your preparation very well. I train a lot of young attorneys, and my advice to them is the only difference between you and a senior attorney is experience. You've studied the same law, you know the same principles. Just stick to your principles and never be shaken by what you know and what you believe in, and you'll never fail in your career.
So, Mr. Rakwena, we're also a leadership podcast, and we always want to bring people who can encourage younger people who also want to get into the same industry that you find yourself in. And you've already expanded on some of the things that you tell young people. So what's your message for young people who are either interested in going to study law, or who are currently studying now, or perhaps are in legal practice at the moment, who want to go into business, the business of law like you have?
Law is to a great extent history. And the analogy that I'm trying to draw is to the effect that if you repeat the mistakes of the past, then you did not learn anything from history. And it's important that we should have lawyers who will be able to keep the wheels of justice running in this country, who will be able to make sure that human rights are not trampled upon, who will also be in a position to make sure that the dignity of people is respected. The tragedy in South Africa is that law is expensive. It's very expensive, and we need to find a way of reducing the expenses. It becomes very expensive to litigate, and many people end up not pursuing their cases because they cannot afford to take their matters to court. Even though there is legal aid helps, but to a limited extent because of the funds that are supposed to be expended. So those are some of the limitations that you find. But it's a very fulfilling career. It's a very interesting career, especially if you enjoy working with people, if you enjoy solving problems, and if you enjoy being there for people. Because sometimes, especially the youngsters of today, they believe if a career is not well paying, then it's not worth pursuing. I don't think we should be driven by the rewards in terms of monetary rewards, but we should be driven by the rewards in terms of fulfilling a dream of someone else. I mean, I get satisfaction when a client walks out of court and say, thank you, I've achieved my goal, I've achieved, justice has been served, and so on. It's fulfilling, and in most instances you get situations wherein clients don't have the funds, and out of your moral conviction, you end up taking the case because you want to demonstrate to this person that justice is, justice is not for the rich. Justice is also for the poor.
Yeah. I'm glad that you do that, because the perception that is quite prevalent now in society is that the law favors the rich. And we've seen it even in political circles where, you know, certain strategies have been bandied about, like the Stalingrad strategy, where people will just litigate, you know, over-litigate, you know, so to speak, so that they can avoid the inevitable. And eventually, you know, justice is never delivered because people always have the means and the funds to take cases, you know, through the courts to the point where, you know, justice is not delivered.
It becomes a farce, yeah. No,
It
definitely.
becomes a farce, you know, there is such a thing as over-litigation, and I've seen it also, for instance, in the case of the public protector. I know there was instances, the former public protector, there was instances where at some point the frivolity of the cases actually led the courts to actually start instituting punitive costs. The costs were actually awarded to the public protector in her personal capacity because they could pick up on that. You know, what's your view on such behavior?
Look, you know, I normally say to people, we will never have the rule of law if we believe that things should happen because the law says so.
Yeah.
Law should be a conviction that is in your heart. If you believe that something is wrong, you don't have to wait for the police officers to arrest you in order for you to admit that I've done wrong. It should be a conscience thing to say, my conscience tells me that this thing is wrong and I should not be doing it. And you cannot have a police officer in each and every street corner.
Yeah.
You cannot have a police officer in each and every house.
Yeah.
And I mean, you look at cases of domestic violence. How is it possible for government to stop them unless there's a change of heart, unless there's a change of attitude towards how we treat each other? You know, Mother Teresa used to say the reason why people are fighting is because they've forgotten that there's an image of Jesus in your face. When I look at you and I don't see Jesus, I'll attack you because I think you're an animal. But if I look at you and I see Jesus, I will respect you. So it should come from the conscience, it should come from the heart to say, and if policing does not happen within you, it cannot happen outside of you. Yeah, it will be very difficult.
Now, Mr. Rakwena, let's address the elephant in the room. We know that, you know, it has been very pervasive in the media that your client, the Inguyama Trust board, has been embroiled in a controversy of late that involved the king himself basically suspending members of the board. Now, for those of you who do not know, the Inguyama Trust is basically an institution, creature of statute, that was established to manage vast tracts of land, actually, 3 million hectares. I stand under correction. 3 million hectares of land to the benefit of the people of KZN. And the sole trustee of this board, of this institution, is His Majesty the King Misuzulukazi Zwelithini. And he also happens to be the chairperson as well of the board of the Inguyama Trust. And what has transpired in the media of late is that the king has decided to suspend all but one member of the board. And that has generated a great deal of consternation, especially on the side of the minister, and perhaps in some circles of society as well. The minister, Mzwanele Nyonzo, argues actually that this act by the king is not sound in law. And he says that only the executive authority, i.e. himself as the minister, has the power to do such a thing. So can you please just walk us through what transpired and how did we find ourselves in this situation?
It's important to appreciate that there are three entities involved. There is what is called the board, and then there is what is called the trust. It's a legal entity. It's a trust that can sue and be sued. And then you've got His Majesty. Now, how these entities interact, there's an act of parliament that was passed, which is called the KwaZulu-Natal Inguyama Trust Act. Now, that act establishes a trust, and that trust is having only one trustee, who is the king. And that trustee is not appointed. He's there by virtue of being the king. And then that act also provides for the affairs of the trust to be administered by a board. Now that board gets elected, or not elected rather, gets appointed. Now the appointment of the board is, there are 8 members to the board. There are 4 members that are appointed by the Minister of Agriculture and, well, it's no longer agriculture now, it's rural development and yeah, yes. And that the Minister appoints the 4 members for a term, a specific term of office. And they are appointed in consultation with His Majesty. That in itself should tell you the role and the powers that the Majesty has. He's got the powers to, in consultation with the Minister, appoint 4 members of the board. Now the other 4 gets appointed by the Minister in consultation with the Premier of KZN, as well as the House of Traditional Leaders within KZN legislature. Now those 8, they serve for a particular term of office, for a particular term of time. And then the king, by virtue of being the trustee, the act gives him the authority to be the chairperson of the board. So the chairperson does not get appointed. He is there automatically by virtue of a reigning king. Now that chairperson has got an authority to appoint a nominee in his place. Now, if the king is of the view that he won't have time to be able to give attention to the board, he will then appoint a nominee. Previously, there used to be a former judge, Jerome Inguyama, who was the chairperson of the board. And subsequent thereto, there's been other, he was removed as a chairperson. There's been the late king, Isilo Uzwelithini, was at one stage the chairperson of the board. And currently, the current reigning king initially had appointed Inkosi Mzimela to be his nominee and the chairperson. However, the term of office of Inkosi Mzimela ended in February last year. And then the king decided to resume his role as the chairperson of the board. So the board is constituted by 9 members. Yeah, which is the 8 members plus the chairperson, who is the king, His Majesty. Now, I wanted to correct the fact that my client is the board or the trustee. No, none of those are my clients. My client is the king himself in his capacity as the chairperson and the trustee. But that does not necessarily say that I'm appointed by the trustee, that the trust or by the board.
Perhaps we should zoom into that, because this, remember now, this implies that you are basically now the person that he has appointed to run the trust.
Yes. That's not true. He still remains the chairperson. I'm not the chairperson. I'm not even the nominee that the Act allows him to can appoint. If I was in that capacity, I would have sat at board meetings. Now, I don't sit at board meetings. And it's only the king that sits at board meetings. Yes.
But how do you respond then to these allegations that you've basically taken over the offices of the Inguyama Trust and that you are effectively, preventing former board members to enter the property?
No, I think it's important to also explain one critical aspect. In common law, there's a right of self-preservation. Now, if your assets or your interests are threatened by certain conduct, you've got a right to preserve those interests and those assets. And that's exactly what the king decided to do, to say, I'm the trustee of this trust. And I believe certain things are not happening accordingly. And it might jeopardize the trust itself. And those issues were not raised with my appointment. They were raised as early as when the king assumed office of the chairperson in March last year, 2024. And they were raised also with the minister then, who is Minister Togoti Diza, who's the Speaker of Parliament now. They were raised with the Portfolio Committee, and they were raised even within the board itself. And the king felt that those issues are not being addressed. They are not being taken on board by the board. In fact, there's a board meeting wherein it was agreed that a forensic audit will be conducted.
Yeah.
Right? When that was supposed to happen, instead of the board following the processes of appointing the people that are supposed to do the audit and so on,
Yeah.
they decided to prolong that process. And from that perspective, I think the king felt that
Yeah.
he needed to act.
Yeah.
And in acting, I consulted with the king for the first time. It was in October. He was visiting the province. He was here in Mpumalanga. I met with him. We sat for more than an hour,
Yeah.
discussing not only the issue of the trust, but we also discussed the land that his ancestors are buried just outside Middelburg. That he wanted it to be declared a heritage site, and he wanted that to be acquired by the royal house. So it was at that point wherein my mandate was crafted to say, I would like you to assist me in this particular aspect.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, it is not as if I take decisions on behalf of the king. I don't. I give advice, and the king would on his own decide to say what is the best option and the best route to take.
Yeah.
Now, the suspension came as a result of a preliminary report that we presented to the king. Remember, there's a team I'm working with. We did a preliminary investigation, and based on that preliminary investigation, the king got convinced that this board is not going to drive the issue of the forensic audit. And this board is not going to cooperate with me. Remember, I was appointed on the 29th of November 2024. And the king addressed the letter to the board informing them of my appointment to say this person has been appointed and this person would be playing this role. It was put in the letter to say I want a forensic audit to take place. The board meets in December, on the 11th of December. They don't discuss that process. They discuss other things. In other words, they pretend as if I don't exist. Yeah, I'm not there. Because one was expecting that if I was taking the affairs of the board, I would have sat at that meeting.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I accepted that it's the board that needs to sit there.
Yeah. Let me come in at this point and then say, what is the quantum? Are you at liberty to disclose the quantum of this report that was presented to the king?
Not necessarily. I can touch on a few aspects that relates to the report.
Yeah.
Yeah. To start with, the investigation established that the contract of the CEO was extended without proper authority.
Yeah.
Our belief is that it is void, and or at least voidable. If it's not void from the beginning when it was extended, at least it's voidable. That's the belief that we still hold. To say, because if you look at the contract itself, the contract specifies that it will end on the 18th of July 2024, and it cannot be extended.
Yeah.
Now, my belief is that the board had two options. They were either supposed to advertise the post or follow the processes of the appointment in terms of procurement or approach the minister to say the term of office of this person has ended. Second, someone, because remember the current CEO was seconded from the department. So they could have done that those are the options that they have.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they did not follow that route.
Yeah.
And secondly, it was in relation to the sale of the land, right? Now, I've requested from the board certain information, which information would have assisted me to understand how this land was sold.
Yeah.
Because I believe the underlying issues that were followed in the sale of the land compromises the Public Finance Management Act, the PMFA. And I hold that belief on the basis of certain things that I've picked up, right? And until such time that I'm finished with information that talks to those issues, then I'll be convinced that the PMFA was not complied with, and that would make the sale to be problematic.
Yeah. Now, before we continue, I just want to go back to your appointment. Now, the minister went on to say that your appointment was actually not legal. It was illegal on the basis that the board, in conjunction with the chairperson of the board, who is the trustee, His Majesty, were the ones who were supposed to make the decision of appointing yourselves. It was not supposed to be a unilateral decision that the king made on its own. So what's your views on that?
Look, I think there's a misconception in terms of what my role is or where do I get myself located. If you want to locate me as an appointed person by the board, then that view will be correct. Because remember, the board has got certain procedures to follow when they appoint service providers. And me as a service provider, I will have to be appointed at a different level, right? Then you've got the trust. The trust also is subjected to certain procurement policies when they want to appoint service providers. Now, I'm the attorney with a mandate on behalf of the King, His Majesty. Yeah. In his capacity as the trustee and the chairperson, right, to advise him on this particular issue. He is within his rights as the king and as the chairperson, because he's got an interest in the matter, to can conduct a forensic audit. It is within his right. If he believes that certain things have not been done correctly, it is within his right to and it is for the board to cooperate with that and not try to block that process.
But the bone of contention is the unilateral decisions that His Majesty the King is taking, because even the firing of all but one board member of the trust is really quite concerning, because you would like to think, as you've explained, there's a governance body, there's an executive authority, the minister, there's so many checks and balances that kind of have to gel in the decision-making process. For instance, the appointment of the board members is something that the king does the minister does in consultation with the king. So even the minister himself doesn't act unilaterally to some extent when he appoints board members. How is it sound that the king just decides, especially from a legal basis, that the king just decides to fire board members? Where does the legal precedent come from?
You see, that's where the misconception comes in, because even the minister says the board has been disbanded, and you are also using the word fire, right?
Suspend.
There's a difference between the two, because what has happened is the board members are still members of the board. They still have that status of being members of the board. They've not been fired. The board has not been disbanded. What has happened is certain members have been suspended within the board. And that suspension was prompted by the forensic report the preliminary report that was presented to the king. The king decided that these people are becoming a stumbling block in terms of making sure that information gets released and making sure that now the Act makes provision for vacancies to be filled, right?
By who?
By the minister. The minister, if the minister is of the view that the governance and the functionality of the board cannot proceed with the two remaining members, which is the chairperson and one board member, the minister is at liberty to can fill in the vacancies that have been created, even on a temporary basis, to say temporarily, I second these people from my department. And that filling in does not have to follow the process of appointment. It can be from his department to second people, to say, I second these people to be part. In fact, the CEO and the CFO were employed by the department, and they were seconded to come and serve here. So And the king, in a letter addressed to the minister, assured the minister to say, personally, I don't believe that there is any challenge in terms of the functionality and the corporate governance of the board. But if the minister was of the view that that's not correct, the minister was at liberty to say, I'm seconding these people to come and assist you in the interim whilst the process is still going on and we're still trying to resolve. Remember, it's the minister who says publicly that there's a difficulty between the chairperson and the board and the CEO to cooperate and work together. Now, when you observe that as the minister, what actions are you taking to rectify that situation? Because you are expected to say, okay, given this aspect, I will then see to it that these factions that are warring, I will put them aside and have a neutral entity temporarily whilst I still investigate the issues. Because the issues that the king complained about, they were raised with the minister long time ago. They were raised with the minister, and it seems as if there's no agency on the part of the department or the minister to deal with these matters. And the king feels that things will go wrong. You see, I mean, throughout the lifespan of the board, the chairperson has been a signatory to all the bank accounts of the board. Now, there's a symbolic significance to that. It gives you the power of oversight to the affairs of the board. Now, a resolution is taken to say the chairperson is replaced as a signatory by other board members. And that in itself is a risk that is posed to the king to say your oversight and your capacity to sign and authorize certain financial transactions is taken away from you. And the issue is raised, but it's not being addressed. Do you understand? And the challenge, where the challenge comes in. So all those things, they place the king at the situation wherein he is being relegated to a ceremonial head without any oversight powers, without any capacity to influence things, because some meetings are held in his absence. And when you try to understand, but were notifications submitted properly in terms of inviting for these meetings, you don't get the sense that there was that kind of proper notification and so on, or proper apology at least, to say I'm not available for this meeting and I delegate that the deputy chairperson can continue with the meetings. Even in terms of, because it's not only, you see, if you're a chairperson of a body, you need to be engaged in the crafting of the agenda. It starts there. When the agenda is crafted, so that when you run the meeting, you've got a proper understanding of the issues and you can guide the meeting. Now, an agenda is crafted. The king is not taken on board in terms of that agenda, how it's crafted,
and
what are the issues.
Supposedly supposed to preside over this meeting.
Yes. So those are some of the challenges that the king was experiencing, and he felt that these things needs to be addressed. And the shortcoming that is there with the Act is that when there are certain aspects like those wherein there are log jams, there's no deadlock breaking mechanism that is presented.
I wanted to touch on that because, I hear you when you're explaining it, but I still feel like, this was a unilateral decision by the king, and I want to know where in law the king is allowed, or is there some area in the law that tells you, that deals with suspensions of board members and who's supposed to do that? Because I can tell you now, for instance, when a president is about to suspend a member of his cabinet, reasonably, a president would be expected to consult with either his cabinet or perhaps even his deploying party to get their input before making the decision. And we acknowledge that the president, and it's it's spelled out in law, that the prerogative to appoint is vested in the president himself. But in this case now, when we're dealing with the issue of the king, I get the impression that the king did not consult on this, and he just made a decision on his own. What do you say about that?
You know, there's a joke that is said by a friend of mine. He says, you know, a mice was attacked by the cats. And the mice complained to the other mice to say, I was attacked by the cats and I want to go and report these cats to the police.
Yeah.
Only to find that at the police station, it is the cats that are police officers.
Yeah.
Now, the point I'm trying to drive at is, you have consulted these people before.
Yeah.
It was agreed that you will proceed with a forensic audit, right? But it never happened.
Yeah.
It never happened. And what other consultation? Because remember, decisions at the board are taken on a majority basis.
Yeah.
You would raise an issue, and if it's shot down because somebody believes that they are not compatible with that particular issue, what is your recourse? Remember, I indicated to you that in common law, it's not only the king, you yourself in common law, you've got a right to self-preservation, right? If something threatens your interest, it can even threaten your life. That's why there's a right to self-defense, right? There's also a right to self-preservation, to say, my interests are being threatened. Yeah, and I need to act. I'll give you another practical example. If couples are married in community of property, and one other party becomes extravagant and he wastes the assets of the joint estate, the other party can go to court and say, I want to exercise my right of self-preservation. I want either the estate must be divided, even though we are not divorced, or there must be an interdict to say this person cannot do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's a law. That's the principle that is there in law. The king is exercising that principle to say, I'm acting in self-preservation. Yes.
Now, I'm not sure if the members who have been suspended have actually sought relief through the courts, but I want to know if what is happening now, do you think your course of action thus far will pass legal muster? Should it be in front of a court?
Look, they are the ones who feel that their rights have been restricted. And I think they can approach the court in that regard. But the point of the matter is, it is not for the king to go to court to say, my suspension is needs to be endorsed by the court, right? Yes, and obviously they've ignored the suspension. I think you are aware of that. They are proceeding. There was a meeting that was held yesterday by the board. So the board is proceeding.
So they are meeting somewhere, not at the offices?
They are meeting at the office. The offices are operational.
Oh,
yeah, the
so
offices.
They come in and they still.
Yeah, the offices are open. They are operational. Yes, 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 yes.
Okay, so this dispels the notion that they were actually prevented from accessing the premises.
No, there was a letter that was written to say that because they are suspended, they should not enter. But they did enter.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's not as if they were prevented. They did enter.
Yeah.
The premises. Yes.
So what do you think of the prospects, though? Should these issues be ventilated in court? Do you think that you'll be able to win?
Look, we are in consultation with the king. Remember, it is only now that he's out of seclusion. So we will be having consultations to get a mandate and instruction as to what should happen under the circumstances. Because I addressed the letter to the board. I think it was on the 20th of December to say, I would like to have access to these documents, to this information. And the response was to challenge my authority, to say, first of all, who's going to pay you? And secondly, why are you, who appointed you? When in fact the appointment was there and it was properly spelled out to say this is the appointment and this is the role that this person will be playing, you see. So to me, it amounts to refusing to subject yourself to the audit. I mean, I'm not imposing myself. If they believe I'm not the right person to do the audit, let them appoint someone else to do the audit. Because that's all that the king wants. The king does not want to have a specific person doing the audit. The king is open to an audit that is independent and forensic. Yes.
So do you think someone has something to hide? Because it looks like the can of worms was opened when this forensic investigation into the audit, basically, into the land started.
Well, personally, I've received 4 calls and emails that were addressed to me by individuals in the community to say, I was done wrong by the board. This is what happened. I've been complaining for the past 18 months. There's been no action on my issues. And I'm happy that you have been appointed. I hope my issues will receive attention. So it tells you that there are issues out there. And there are people who feel that certain things were done not correctly or to their satisfaction. And for that reason, they want the audit to happen. Yes.
Now, earlier on in our discussion, you mentioned the corporate governance aspect, and corporate governance dictates that in any turnover of board members, so to speak, there's always this need to maintain some sort of continuity. So, do you think, in your opinion, that it's right that suddenly so many members are suspended? And I know you will still say that they are not fired, but I think the writing is on the wall at this point. Do you think it's good corporate governance for this to happen? Because already, like, warning signs from a corporate governance perspective are going off. Is it right for so many people to be suspended at one go? Does this bode well for the running of the trust as well?
In fact, your question confirms what we've been saying, that given the fact that the chairperson is permanent, his role should be very active within the board. You should not have situations where in meetings, because he becomes the institutional memory of the board, because he is not confined to a particular term of office. He is there for as long as he's still alive, right, or his nominee. But then you must also remember that there are other checks and balances that governs the board. For instance, the King Code 5, the PMFA, and other regulations that are there that governs the board. So all those things, when taken in totality, you don't threaten the governance of the board. Because remember, the board is not the functionary, even though the Act says that. So it's got subcommittees, and those subcommittees are under the guidance of the CEO and the CFO. So that functionality, you'll still have it for as long as those subcommittees are there. But the board is there to give guidance and to give direction in terms of making sure that policies are adhered to, making sure that certain things do happen within the board. So the fact that, and remember, we had given ourselves a very short space of time to finalize this audit, because this audit is not ever ending or never ending. It is confined to at least 5 years. That's what the King had indicated, that for the past 5 years, investigate and come back to me to indicate what the issues are. And there was no intention to suspend the board, mind you. Like I'm indicating to you, that the mere fact that documents were requested, and I mean, at the meeting that the board held on the 11th of December, they were supposed to debate this issue, because they had received a letter of my appointment to say, what is the status of this? How do we relate to this? Or invite His Majesty to say, come and sit and be able to clarify to us what is it that is happening. You see, he was not part of that meeting of the 11th of December. And subsequent thereto, because I was expecting that at that meeting, they will come back to me to say, we have met and we believe we need to create a structured process and approach that you should follow in terms of what should happen. It would have been a positive sign to say, we want to cooperate, we want to work together, and we want to see to it that these things happen. Or at least at that meeting, say, we don't believe you are the right person. We have instructed, we've taken a resolution that processes be put in place for the proper appointment through the board itself now, following our procurement policy, to say somebody must be appointed. If you want to participate in that process, do participate and also compete with the others. It would have been a positive sign to indicate something that is tangible.
Yeah.
But nothing of that nature happened.
Yeah.
They met yesterday. Still, the king was not there,
Yeah.
and the agenda was not discussed with him,
Mm.
and the issues that were raised were not touching on the issue of how do we fast track the process of the because remember, it's not the king that called for the forensic audit. The portfolio committee also called for it.
Yeah.
Yes, and when the board was given a audit that was qualified, including the trusts, the portfolio committee called for that there should be an audit that takes place, because the king had already raised it. They were aware of it.
Yeah.
You see, but still it does not happen. And the question is, if there's nothing, in fact, you see, if I were a board member, I would have pushed for it to say, in order to dispel whatever notion that is out there that says there are shenanigans that are happening, underlying problems, let's have this audit so that it can clear us and be able to dispel whatever notion that is there. But I don't get that sense.
Now, Mr. Rakwena, it appears to me that there is two centers of power. So I want to find out from you, who is actually running the trust at this moment? Because if the board is continuing to conduct their business as normal, and on the other end as well, you have been appointed as well to administer the trust, who is running, who is in charge, who does the executive team account to at this present moment?
I'm not running the trust. The trust have got their own schedule and agenda and meetings and so on.
But
I'm not.
decisions of the board, for instance, this board now, when they make decisions, are their decisions being implemented, or is it the instruction that's coming from the king through yourself?
No, remember how the board runs. It runs on the basis of decisions taken by vote, if ever there's no consensus. Now, whatever decisions that are taken by vote gets carried. Yes, and the staff is still there. The CEO is, despite the fact that there was a suspension by the king, but they've ignored it, and they are proceeding to act. Yeah, in that particular fashion. So the board is as far as they are concerned, functional, and there's been no stopping of any activities. They are operating. They are continuing, notwithstanding the fact that the king is of the view that they are not supposed to be doing that. And in fact, the king asked them to postpone yesterday's meeting, to say postpone this meeting because to start with, it was not called with and I need to oversee and preside over this meeting. Because if you are presented with the agenda at the meeting, how are you going to run that meeting? You become disempowered in terms of, because issues needs to be discussed with you prior to the meeting so that you can be able to guide the meeting to say a decision that needs to be taken is along these lines in relation to governance and proper functionality of the board.
I mean, and the Companies Act itself also talks about notice periods as well.
Yes, there are notice periods, yes.
All the people who are in the board are supposed to have knowledge and express their interest in attending the meeting or not. So obviously, if you circumvent the king, then it does raise some impressions, some unfavorable ones, that there's probably some ulterior motives in this. But Mr. Rakwena, now this is a very, very polarizing situation, and I'm sure this has kind of put you in a very precarious situation. So have you received any threats? Has your life been endangered ever since you've started this project now?
No. I've not received any threats, and I've not received any calls. Yeah. I've heard people saying you need to be cautious, but I've not received something against that to say, hey, you need to be cautious because of people are just maybe apprehensive to say you may be touching on toes and you may be stepping on other people's territory. But I've not received any threats. But that does not necessarily suggest that I don't look after myself. I try my level best to be safe wherever I am and not to expose myself to any danger.
Yeah. And then what's the way forward then in your view now for the trust?
Look, obviously tomorrow there is a function that the king will be addressing celebrating the heroic deeds of Nkosi and so on. So all those things are taking the attention of the king somewhat away from the issues at hand. But as soon as he is free, one would have a consultation with him to say, this is where we stand. I cannot take a decision. Yeah, I can only present the facts to him and say, these are the facts. You need to decide what is the best way to follow. And based on his advice and his mandate and his instruction, one will execute that instruction.
And we'll definitely be watching events unfold with a keen interest. Now, Mr. Rakwena, you also happen to be a politician as well. So I believe that you are affiliated to a political party, which you'll tell us a little bit more about. So talk to us about that.
Yes. Look, like what Steve Biko used to say, that you cannot divorce yourself from the material conditions and the realities that surrounds you. And given that understanding, politics is not a choice, it's not a career. Yeah. To some of us, it was imposed on you by the conditions that you live in. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I also decided to take a career in law. I mean, witnessing the injustices that was happening and a number of things that one experienced that was done to black people, you felt that you needed to do something in terms of addressing that. And my contribution is through the law, and it's also through politics. So I'm very active. I've been active at the level of student politics. I mean, in Middelburg in the 70s, my uncle used to be a member of SASO BPC. Then there used to be a party called Black People's Convention that was dealing with issues that were there. And some of the meetings, I was still a youngster then, he would take me to some of those meetings that were held. And you get conscientized in the process, and you get to understand certain things. So I entered politics actively when I was a student at TEFLO. That's when I was very active in politics. And it has not, I've not stopped since then. Yeah. Currently, previously I used to be the Secretary for Legal and Constitutional Affairs within ASAPO. ASAPO, its office bearers are referred to as secretaries. Yeah, so I was a Secretary for Legal and Constitutional Affairs. And when there was a vacancy in the spokesperson department, because the spokesperson who used to be there left for personal reasons, I was requested by the president to take that through the reshuffle. So I've been a spokesperson since the beginning of 2024 for ASAPO. And, you know, I believe we're all called to serve. Yeah, and we're all called to serve because when an injustice happens to the next person, that does not mean it will not happen to you. I mean, there's a German guy who crafted a phrase that says, when they came for the Jews, I kept quiet. And when they came for this group, I kept quiet. And when they came for me, there was no one to speak on my behalf. And I think if we appreciate that concept, to say, it does not mean that if it does not happen to you, it won't happen to you the next day. And part of our role, even at the level of not being active in politics, is to see to it that we create for ourselves a society that is good for everyone to live in. And that society can only be created by us. It cannot come from the sky. It cannot come from any other person. We are the one feeling the crunch. I mean, when you drive through our streets, the level of poverty, people begging on the streets, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see a man who's got a family to feed appreciating a 5 rand that you place on his hand. Yeah, and we need to find a way. I mean, this country is rich enough to can be able to afford all of us. There shouldn't be somebody walking the streets begging. There shouldn't be somebody walking the streets without employment and children not going to school and so on. We should do better, and I think we can do better.
Now, Mr. Rakwena, you mentioned your political home, which is Azapo. Can you please just articulate your policy perspectives as an organization, briefly so, and also perhaps some of the ideology as well behind the Black consciousness movement? Because a lot of us were not alive around that time, but we do relate with some of the principles, in the books that we read about, the late political icon Steve Biko. So please just walk us through that.
Yeah. Look, Steve Biko was a member of a white student body called NUSAS in the mid-60s.
Yeah.
And it used to happen that whenever they've got conferences, they would converge, because remember during those days, there used to be what is called white areas and black areas. And if you are found, if you are found in a white area after certain hours, you were arrested. It was a crime. So unless you've got a permit that allows you, either because of employment, to be there, maybe you're working night shift and so on. So each time a meeting had to be stopped because the time for blacks to move out of the white areas had struck. And Steve Biko looked at these things and he said to himself, what is it that we are doing here? It seems as if we're playing a house. Yeah, there's nothing tangible that we're doing. And it was immediately after the banning of ANC and the PAC and the arrest of many leaders, Mandela and the likes. Others have escaped to go overseas, to go to other African countries. So that period was characterized by a sense of great fear. It was a crime to even mention the word ANC then. It was a crime to be seen with any literature that talks about banned aspects and so on. And the torture and the harassment that people experienced, the killings, drove Steve Biko to analyze our situation. And in analyzing the situation of the black person, he says, I'm faced with a situation that needs black men to fight. But I've got this black man who is an empty shell. He is so much afraid, he does not to do anything. He just wants to survive the next day and hope that nothing will happen to him. And Steve Biko felt that the only way to change this situation is to work on the mind of the black person. And that's how he came about with black consciousness. Well, it's not his original thought, but he drew lessons from the US because it was very active in the US, and he aligned it with our situation in South Africa. And through black consciousness, because black consciousness says, look at the situation that you find yourself in. And he looked at the irrationality of fear, because fear is ingrained. It's something that you learn. It's not ingrained. You learn to be afraid, and you can unlearn to be afraid. And Steve Biko instilled that sense to say, take away the fear in you, because the fear makes you not do the things that you're supposed to do. The fear makes you to be afraid even of a very small boy, a white boy, just because he happens to be called Lambas. Therefore, you end up being afraid of him. And in fact, it contrasts with your own child. Just because this one is white, your own child, you discipline your own child. You are not afraid of him, but you are afraid of this one because he happens to carry a certain power with him. Now, Steve Biko instilled this sense of black consciousness in us to say, as black people, we need to regain our strength. And regaining our strength can be through appreciating, first of all, that we are black and we are beautiful. Appreciating our right to self-identification. Blacks then used to be called Bantus. They used to be. Steve Biko said, no, we are going to give ourselves a title. You are not going to call us by what you believe should be. And he enforced the term black. Now, the term black does not refer to skin color. It refers to a mental attitude. In other words, your mind is liberated, and you are able to analyze things and be able to say, this I'm not going to tolerate. This goes against my culture, this goes against my beliefs as a black person, this goes against my values as Ubuntu and so on. And it was through that process that, and it took a very short space of time, because within 3 years, in 1973, we saw the uprisings of the workers. The first major strike that was conducted by the workers. In 1976, we saw the uprisings of 1976. I mean, other parties want to claim 1976 as their own. But look at the pictures of 1976. The pictures will tell a story. The walls were painted black power. And other parties were not calling themselves black. PAC was calling itself African. And even the sign, if you look at some of the images are of a black fist, right? PAC is an open palm. ANC is a hitchhike.
Oh, it was a hitchhike.
Sign, yes. If you look at the old signs of the ANC prior to the banning, theirs is a hitchhike. The black fist came up with black power. So the influence of 1976 that changed the character of this country was through black consciousness and was through the influence of Steve Biko, the influence of Mapetla Mohapi. Some of the legends are still alive. I mean, we've got an old man who's now 83, Ntate Bokwe Mafuna. You've got the former chancellor of the former chancellor of UNISA, Pani Pichani, Professor Pani Pichani. They are the people who were with Steve Biko who started black consciousness. Yes, yes. Some have passed on, but you still have those legends that still are among us. I mean, the former president of AZAPO, Ntate Mangena, was with Steve Biko, and they crafted the policy. They crafted now black consciousness is guided by two philosophies or ideologies. It's black consciousness, rather black consciousness movement, or AZAPO currently, is guided by two philosophies, which is black consciousness as well as scientific socialism. Now, scientific socialism talks to how we want to structure our economy, as opposed to what is currently there, which is a mixed economy, to a great extent leaning towards capitalism. We believe that our economy should be guided by the principles of scientific socialism, and part of that is land and all its resources must reside with the state. In other words, there shouldn't be people who are holding land for speculative purposes. There shouldn't be people who are driving the economy for their own personal benefits. There's nothing wrong in having companies running their economy, but the means of production must be owned together with the workers that work those means of production. I mean, you look at a building rising, and the people who are behind the building, putting up that building, is the workers. But they end up earning peanuts. They end up not having the fruits of their labor being honored and respected. So as AZAPO, we believe that this country needs an overdose of black consciousness. I mean, if you see the things that are happening today, you can appreciate that we need an overdose of black consciousness, in the sense that some of the things that are happening, the gender-based violence, they talk to an empty soul, a man without a shell. I mean, a man who's an empty shell without any soul or without any sense of appreciation of who he is. I mean, a man as a protector is not supposed to be doing some of these things that are being mentioned. Some of these things that are happening, the aggression that you see in some of our schools, the fights that are there and so on, can be attributed to the fact that we don't have content. We've become empty within ourselves. And black consciousness can give us that sense of purpose, that sense of drive to say, you've got a role to play. And that role is to change society.
It seems to me, and it's always been my belief, that the chains of mental apartheid are much, much more stronger to break than the physical ones. Although we might be living in a free society, we are very much still imprisoned. And it makes me also appreciate why a person of the late Steve Biko's stature, why he himself was such a threat to the establishment at the time, because he was not just dealing with it at a superficial level, but he was actually going to the root, to deal with the fear. Because when you look at theories like, the guy who invented lynching, a lot of it was to use other people as an example, to use fear and shock as a way of entrenching, this culture of subservience, through, torture and such means, the lynching that we all know about and watching the movies now. That was a way of entrenching this ideology of fear, fear of the white man, so on and so forth, And even the fact that there was existence of the term clean bus is a paradox in itself, How do you become afraid of someone who is smaller than you? How do you call someone who is clean your bus, So I love the fact that, the Black consciousness movement really strive to do that. But I do have a concern though, and I feel maybe you can just articulate this for me. The ideals of Azapo and the Black consciousness movement are noble at best, but when you juxtapose this against the electoral performance of Azapo, especially in this recent election, you did not fare very well. So please walk us through what the shortcomings may be and what plans there are afoot to improve the electoral performance of your party.
Look, I think one needs to understand electoral politics from the perspective that he who pays the piper calls the tune, right? He calls the tune in the sense that our elections are very expensive as a country. We shouldn't be having elections at the level that we are having. I mean, there was at one stage where ANC was said to have spent over $1 billion in terms of their election. If you look at currently, there's an act of parliament that bars parties from receiving a certain amount, up to a certain amount per financial year. I think it's 15 million from a particular source. And it also bars parties from receiving funding from outside. Now, despite the fact that it's an act, there are measures to change that. Because they've realized that funding becomes the lifeblood of elections. And when you make funding the lifeblood of elections, you are basically saying to whoever has got funds must be the one who dictates. Because a number of parties, there's been a number of people who approached Azapo to say, if you can drop your policy on land, we will fund you. If you can do 1, 2, 3, we will fund you. But we have said to ourselves, we're not going to be dictated to, because we believe our minds are free. We are not going to be dictated to by someone who feels that, and indeed you are correct, Azapo is a threat, because they realize that once the mind is free, you will have a black person who will not be subdued, who will not take orders, but who will think for himself and be able to rationalize and say, this is what is in my best interest and so on. So elections to a great extent have been on the basis that we have not been funded enough and we have not been given publicity. I mean, parties would get enormous amount of publicity and they would rationalize and say it is because they command support. But remember, if you were to put all the parties together, none of the parties on their own and with their own members will win elections. Because currently ANC is standing at just under 1 million members. And it won elections with 11 million votes the last time prior to these past elections. So that in itself tells you that it is the ordinary members of the public that are the ones who are putting the government in power. And parties must be given an equal footing in convincing the members of the public to say, listen to us and listen to what we can offer. Now, politics of the stomach have introduced a system wherein if you don't give people T-shirts, if you don't give them food parcels, if you don't pass them to your venues.
Access to even business opportunities.
Yes. They believe that, and they fail to realize the bigger picture, that those things are short term. Why don't you fight for parties that will give you your land and give you your dignity back and make sure that you've got what you deserve as a black person? Because this is the only country we have. If things fail here, where are we going to go? Others have got options. They've got 2 passports. They can go to Europe.
Same for us. I think, look, with that being said, a lot is still going to happen, especially in the politics. What I've observed is that there's a fragmentation that's been happening, especially on the left side of the political spectrum. So yeah, it remains to be seen how things will develop for the foreseeable future, but I still hope that we'll see more of Azapo contesting the polls and really making a good case for themselves.
You see, just in closing, the other challenge that we have is we allow ourselves to be fragmented as black parties. White people don't allow themselves to be fragmented. They can have various parties, but when it comes to critical issues, they are one. They are one when it comes to how to deal with land, how to deal with the economy, and so on. But we are not one when it comes to those things. And ask yourself, who is behind our fragmentation?
I wish we had more time to discuss these
Thank
things,
you.
Mr. Rakwena.
Thank you so much.
But we appreciate having you coming on this platform. We are running out of time, so I just want to thank you for coming, for gracing us with your presence, and putting us through a political education, but also dealing with the burning issues that we are currently dealing with, i.e. the issue of the Inguyama Trust. But as the LEAD podcast, we're very passionate about the development side of leadership as well. You know, we always believe in leadership legacy. So we'd like to invite you to join us at a later stage in a setting where we can create something that can allow some of our members to really just benefit from, you know, the information that you have at your disposal. I believe that you're a repository of legal and political information. So can you avail yourself for that in the near future, where we can sit down and craft some material that can educate our members?
God, certainly. In fact, I think I mentioned earlier on to you that we are all called to serve. And the legacy that we should leave behind should not be the legacy of material things, but it should be the legacy of having changed people's lives.
Indeed. So with that being said, thank you so much for coming to the LEAD podcast, Mr. Rakwena. And for our members and our viewers, we appreciate having you coming through. As always, we always strive to bring you leadership. Wherever it is, we bring them to you so that you can be inspired, so that you can also be the leader of tomorrow. With that being said, goodbye and see you again next time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Yeah, we're running out of time.